Did you know that they hate you? And who are they, you may ask? Well, they are the usual suspects.
Do you have any idea how narrow that how little that narrows it down?
Yep. They are everybody in charge of the institutions. They are the entrenched media and politicians. They are the people who mainly, you may notice, congregate around the cities. And one of the reasons for that would be the fact that cities tend to turn into hive minds. You get people in the cities, like myself when I lived in Manchester, who may deviate slightly outside of whatever hegemonic paradigm is going on in there. But for the most part, because of the close proximity, the fact that you're bombarded with propaganda left, right, and centre, and often they're the places where universities are set up, people in cities all tend to think the same, and that it tends to be an incredibly leftist perspective that they all take on, at least over here in the West. And because of that, they hate you. They hate you living in the countryside in a nice, quiet little mountain town, and they want to destroy your way of life because otherwise they're not completely sure that you will fall in line. And this is one of the things that people are just becoming more overt in telling people online. And as such, I thought I'd draw your attention to this recent hangout that you did with Carl talking about our Cyberpunk Dystopia. Volume 2, there will be a Volume 3 coming up very soon because Carl's already finished the document as far as I'm aware. And recently when I've been started to be advertised things online on YouTube adverts like AI friends, another such thing, build your AI friend who will tell you they care about you and love you and will never abandon or betray you. I realise that this whole Cyberpunk Dystopia thing is much closer than we're expecting. You know, live in the metaverse, live in the pod, eat the boogs. So check that out for a horrifying dystopian nightmare that we're already living in.
I haven't had those adverts yet. I'm dreading them.
Yeah, I don't know why I came up with I got those adverts, because normally they target adverts, but I've got friends.
Okay.
At least, I hope. You guys are my friends, right? Anyway.
I'll get the Callum bot in, you can have him.
Oh, good. He might be more human, so that makes sense. A bit less autistic. So one of the things that I wanted to look at was this guy, Adam Kotsko. This tweet started going around recently. You can see, you know, he's got a bit ratioed in the likes to quote tweets, and I will say I was one of the people who was quote tweeting this person as well. I looked into him. Adam Kotsko seems to be a leftist political theologian, so he looks at the theological parallels that you can draw between certain religions and certain political outlooks, and of course he's got things on such like the political theology of neoliberalism, which he says is a bad thing, and I will point you to that article in a moment. But despite being somebody who says that apparently neoliberalism is something that's evil and is meant to nudge people along into compliance with state doctrine, which is something that to a certain extent I agree with, he comes out with statements like this. In discussions of reducing car dependency, one often hears, what about people in remote rural areas? And my gut instinct is, people shouldn't be living there in the first place. The solution is to give them generous grants to relocate among other humans. Now, isn't this just the most humane and peaceful way of going about clearing out the countryside? Is this not something that sounds a bit like a cultural revolution to you?
I mean, I've heard the joke version of this, which is a good point, which is, oh, we're starving, we need food, and it's like, you live in a desert. Move.
Well, there is that, but in the West...
But the idea that, you know, there's a good reason. You might actually want some food, but oh my God, people are still driving cars, so 2015. I don't care about your opinion on car dependency.
Well, I mean, sadly, this kind of attitude is the kind of attitude that is leading to us potentially having all of our cars confiscated from us in 2030. And which is awful because, I mean, at base level, it's a gross violation of property rights for the state to just come in and say, you can't have that anymore. We're going to take it from you. Here, take the electric scooter, take the electric bike. I'll be, you know, if that actually happens, I'll be right there with Peter Hitchens on the electric bikes, on the electric scooter question, you know, the ES question. The ESQ.
What, the solution to the e-scooters?
We need the e-scooter question. We need it answered, and Peter Hitchens is the only man who can answer that question. But no, this is just overt totalitarian authoritarianism. He just wants to clear out the countryside because of the fact that he doesn't like the people who live there. At the end of the day, you can dress it up whatever way you want. Oh, it's to reduce car dependency.
Don't you know you use more carbon when you don't live in my mega city? I was like, yeah, well, I'm happier, yes. So go to hell.
Yeah, Chad, yes, good. This is a good thing. And then he carries on in this little thread here. But what if they don't What if they like living in remote rural areas?
What if they're happier? No.
Yeah, what if they're happier? Well, I'm not happy, therefore they can't be either.
There's someone you forgot to ask.
Yep. Jesus says no. Sorry, you can't always get what you want.
But I literally can.
What a condescending thing to say.
But Harry, what do you mean? Like, the guy owns the land. I'm going to buy the land. I'm going to buy a car from a guy who owns a car, and then I can drive around in my car in the countryside. The people saying I can't get what I want here are you. Who just turn up and say, well, you can't do this.
These are leftists, so you can't expect them to respect, people's hard work or property or right to their property. A lot of people would like to live in a dense, transit-rich setting, but can't. They can move to the city. If there are retards out there who actively want to move to bustling urban megacities, then they have every right to do so.
Yeah. No one in the countryside is stopping them.
Yeah. In fact, if we've got those sorts of people in the countryside, I would rather they get out because they're probably not going to fit in with the generally quite quiet and peaceful way of life that those people have out in the countryside, or at least certainly where I'm from, either because they can't afford it or it simply doesn't exist where they are. Well, that's just a circumstantial problem in that case. Nobody else has to pay for the fact that your circumstances suck. And if that sounds harsh, don't worry, it'll never happen. And this is where the cope comes in. This is where the absolute doublespeak delusion comes in. It will never happen because our governmental institutions are insanely biased in favour of rural areas. Are they? Are they? Okay, if you say so. They'll be fine. I'm just a guy over here having an opinion. And also, just to say, is it that the governmental institutions are biased in favour of rural areas, or just that urban areas suck that badly? Just by their own merit, they're terrible. We've looked at New York before, the bodega situations, where you can go to your bodega and maybe expect to get like a bit of... you go in for butter and you get a little bit of lard grease that someone's scraped off the inside of their fridge around back, and that's apparently a good thing that you can get from New York. Maybe cities just as self-sustaining entities nowadays with, radical progressive ideology taking over, suck. Maybe they just suck to live in. Isn't it mean to imply that rural people's lifestyle is bad and wrong? As someone who lives in Chicago, all I can say to that is cry me a river. And there is just straight away right there. My life sucks because the place that I live in sucks. Therefore, you can't be happy either. It's naked envy and greed. And that is what was all that's motivating these people. And once again, this man is a political theologian. If we go to the next link, he has this particular article talking about the political theology of neoliberalism, where he says, the ideals of free trade and government facilitating it, etc., is all very evil and bad. And once again, I agree to a certain extent with the idea that the government should probably not have any fingers in the economy whatsoever because it tends to lead to bad things. But when you're arguing against this sort of evil secret totalitarianism while saying at the same time we need to forcibly remove, he says he wants to compensate people, but what happens if you say reject the government's generous offer of money?
It so much reminds me of also, displacing brown people from the far right who are like, yeah, well, we'll compensate them. I'm not a genocidal far right member. I'm like, yeah, well, what if they don't want to accept your compensation? So there we go. Yeah, okay, you're a Nazi.
Yeah, that's always the thing, which is that, if I don't accept your ever so generous offer, what then? Do you just happily stand aside and let me continue to live my rural way of life? No, of course you don't. That's when you get the guns out and you start to forcibly remove people from these lovely little quiet villages and towns into the big, horrible, stinking cesspool of the cities that we've got in the West at the moment. And we've got more examples of that. We've got this guy, Matt Glacius, who, as far as I can tell, is kind of on the neolib, neocon spectrum, very much in favour of like war in Iraq and etc. back in the day. I'm not too familiar with this guy's work, but he put, if you could scroll up a little bit for us, Michael, thank you. He shared out this graph just saying, as a result of declining confidence in the police, small businesses and the military are the only institutions that the majority of the public has confidence in. I'm surprised that the military, although it's less visible, I would say, the sort of stuff that we've covered where the military is putting out videos saying like, here's how you need to be able to respect people's pronouns and what to do in a situation, yada, yada, yada. But people...
They do have a -5 point change over 10 years.
Yes, it is a -5 point.
It's not 10 years, 1 year.
Yeah, but small business for the most part is absolutely leading the charge in public confidence. And rightfully so, because small business is the sort of thing that it's not some faceless corporation. I can go down to the corner shop and see old Margaret behind the counter. She knows me on a first name basis. I have a little chat with her. Oh, how's the family doing? You know, these are people who are part of the community, people who potentially do work for the community outside of their jobs, you know. Very pleasant experiences to do so. What do you think Matt Iglesias has to say about this?
It's not carbon efficient.
No, even less, even more ridiculous than that, because he just states outright, confidence in small businesses is so insane. Put your trust in a large, well-known national or global brand with a reputation to worry about, lots of media scrutiny, and highly professionalized management. So just trust the experts.
What?
That's the essence of this statement. Trust the experts.
Yeah, don't trust the small business that relies on word of mouth and therefore can't do a thing wrong without everyone knowing about it.
And also knows you by name.
Rely on the mega corporation that literally employs people to be professional liars.
Yes, rely on the mega corporation that's entrenched with ESG scores and probably hates you. No. No, I won't. This sort of stuff makes me actively want to go out and spend only in small business environments. And to be fair, I probably should. If anything, this is a kick up my rear to say, yeah, I should be supporting more small businesses. I shouldn't be going straight to corporations like Amazon to be able to get a quick fix of whatever it is that I'm looking for. Maybe it'll cost a little bit more. Maybe it means going a little bit out of the way. But when the alternative is to patronize these faceless companies that hate me, maybe I should just put a little bit more support into Margaret behind the counter, you know? Maybe that's not a bad thing. And he carries on to, you know, add a little bit of an explanation to this, because, you know, like, just stating it outright maybe wasn't the best idea. Maybe I need to expand on this just a little bit more. Renting a car from Hertz or Avis at an airport you've never flown into and then staying at Hampton Inn or Courtyard by Marriott, I assume he's sponsored by all of these companies because he's making sure to get the full names in there, in a town you've never visited, is such a stress-free pleasure compared to trying to find a reliable plumber in your hometown. Brands and scale! Brands and scale, Callum. You need to consider the brands and scale. And also, none of these things are comparable to a plumber. So, complete nonsense, off-kilter, just like non-sequitur example right there. And then he carries on to just like bury his own point. To the point where I think maybe this is ironic, but still. The exception to this rule, of course, is journalism, where you would eschew the corporate lamestream MSN and get all of your information from artisanal take vendors, like me. Slow and boring, which I can only assume describes Matthew himself. And I found a book that this man wrote. Can you guess what it's about? It's like quite against the trends that we see nowadays of population reduction by suggesting 1 billion Americans, the case for thinking bigger. This is the Dr. Evil kind of plan for neoliberalism type, like 1 billion Americans.
Just triple the population.
Yes.
Nothing will go wrong.
And I got a little synopsis from Wikipedia because I thought, why not just like see what it's about? Let's see what it says it's about. And it says here, 1 billion Americans argues that America is not overcrowded. I mean, I don't think anyone's arguing that it is, and could have 1 billion citizens. Should is a different question, and still have less than half the population density that Germany has today. And I assume a lot of this would involve paving over flyover country, you know? Everywhere gets to be LA. Everywhere gets to be a horrible, dense, homeless camp. Beautiful, brilliant, it's just what we want. Additionally, it makes the case that America is justified for wanting to stay relevant into the far distant future, and that in order to do so, it will need to be populated like China and India, because, you know, their infrastructure is going so great over there. In order to support growth, Iglesias argues for a variety of programs, including, can you guess where this is going? Is it going to involve personal responsibility and individual liberty? Of course it isn't, no. Increased government spending on childcare and daycare, use of S-trains for urban transportation, and increased immigration to the United States. What everybody's asking for. Everybody just wants more and more immigration. Constantly, under the general rubric of increasing the population. So this is a perfect example of graph go up. As long as population graph go up, only good things can happen. What nonsense. How ridiculous. But this just seems like a very common perspective that a lot of these sorts of more mainstream thinkers are taking on recently. And I found one of the perfect examples of the mindset and attitude that goes into this was this. This is a screenshot because sadly the person, Jackson Kernian, has deleted this tweet. Understandably so, it's got a little bit of a ratio going on there, but he stated, "I unironically embrace the bashing of rural Americans. They as a group are bad people who have made bad life decisions. Some, I assume, are good people. But this nostalgia for some imagined pastoral way of life is stupid, and we should shame people who aren't pro-city." And in the same way that Sam Harris saying that if Hunter Biden had children in his basement, I wouldn't care, this is complete mask off. This is the attitude that's going into people like Kotsko and Matthew Iglesias saying that we need to basically destroy the rural population, we need to destroy small businesses. It's not because of any actual values that they hold or virtues that they're trying to espouse. It's because they hate you. It's because they hate you. And I just love Chuck here, his brilliant counterpoint. Who the F will grow your food, retard? This is one of the things that people seem to forget. And also, just as a reminder for why we don't want everywhere to be a big city, as if, you know, general knowledge and cultural osmosis hasn't taught everybody out there that you don't want to be a big city at this point. Anyway, I'll just direct us to Michael Shellenberger's Substack. Shellenberger is a environmental guy. He's got some books like Apocalypse Never, and most recently did a book called San Francisco, where he talks about why progressives ruin big cities. And he's on his Substack, he's got loads of information about San Francisco and LA, basically all the big Californian cities, how they're destroying themselves with progressive policies. And I mean, the title says it alone, San Francisco's slow motion suicide. Just, I'll throw a few excerpts out here. Right now, the city is running supervised drug consumption in United Nations Plaza. There, city-funded service providers supervise people smoking fentanyl and meth they buy from drug dealers across the street. So, would you like your taxes to be subsidizing people's drug addiction?
No, I want to subsidize my drug addiction.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know,
it's the libertarian answer. No.
Yes, it is.
I don't do drugs. Don't do drugs, kids.
No, don't do drugs. I wouldn't recommend that. And also, voters have found themselves, as it says, in the strange position of paying for fentanyl, meth, and crack to use on public property. So it's not even that these people are being paid to do it in their own homes or like in some dingy street corner where they're not as easy to see. They're doing it in a very public plaza. So even just the aesthetic component of San Francisco, which from what I've heard from when Carl describes when he went there, has some beautiful architecture, but you can't pay attention to any of it because there's some crackhead taking a crap in the middle of the street right in front of you. Either that or people just buggering each other. Like, do we want this?
Yeah, sorry.
Do you want your beautiful rural countryside to turn into San Francisco? Because I bloody well don't, but they want it because they hate you. They hate your way of life. They hate the fact that you being further away from these gigantic information centers like the cities in Silicon Valley means that you are less easy to control. And I found this clip that just perfectly sums it up from South Park. And Callum happily edited this one for me because I couldn't find the episode it was from. So big thanks there, big props there for you. Just play that clip, Michael, just so
because we have to live in LA, and if we can't live in quiet, simple, peaceful mountain towns, then nobody will. Wait. Zoom into a close-up on my face when I do that, ready? Then nobody will. That's it. Because we have to live.
There you go. So South Park proving as prophetic as ever, and all I can say is that the people arguing that we should basically destroy the countryside and turn them into Mega City 1 unironically sicken me.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this premium book club, Lawrence Wright's The Looming Tower, The Road to 9/11. If you want to follow what else we're putting out, like me, you can follow me on Getter at @CallumOnGetter. Thank you and goodbye.